Everyone's in. We're all ready to go now.
Yes, you're good to go.
Oh my, everyone. Hey, I hope you're still all there with us because we've just been having one of those mornings. And thank you for sticking in with us. And I appreciate Megan and everyone helping us fix this and get us back and going as quick as we could. Welcome to day 3 of ULA conference. I'm Daniel Mockley, the president of ULA, and we're very pleased to have you this morning for another wonderful day of conference. And we're excited for our keynote speaker, Julius, who's been really amazing to stick with us through the technical difficulties and so polite. He's just wonderful. Quick reminders, conference hashtags, ULA 2021, ULA, we are the heart. Want to thank our sponsors really quick. Again, it's been a tough economic year for a lot of our libraries, and so for them to sponsor the conference has been a huge boon. Thank you for sponsoring us. And then, of course, to our exhibitors, if you haven't had the chance to go and drop in on these exhibits yet, remember there's the exhibitors tab in the attendee hub. And we express our gratitude for these wonderful people that came and supported the conference. The Career Services booth is also available in that exhibitor tab. If that can be of any help to you, please come and check it out. We'd like to help you with employment in any way that we can there. Reminder about our game going on. This is the leaderboard right now as of a couple minutes ago. A certain David Bird has the lead. I love Davey. He does a great job, and Heather Walker, Michelle Graves, just letting you know, 6th and up, there's a little gift card. So some incentives to even get to 6th place or up if you can do that on this game. Want to make you a reminder about the silent auction that began yesterday. It's going, I think, pretty well. And that is going to be open until 2 p.m. Shortly after our author presentation this afternoon. It's in the exhibitors tab under ULA silent auction. The shop is still open for any kind of conference swag that you want from this year or the next year for 2022. And then we still have 2020 items that we just didn't even get the chance to distribute, but will of course be rare because, you know, the rarest stuff is stuff that wasn't able to totally happen. This afternoon, we have Tara Westover, author of Educated, a memoir, joining us. And that event will begin at 12. But the first part of that will be our presidential inauguration of our wonderful incoming president, Rita Baggio Christensen. And I just want to make note that as far as we can tell, this is a historical day for ULA. And looking back on the history of ULA from what we could see from all the presidents, we have elected our first person of color as our Utah Library Association president, and that will happen today at 12. So an interesting, wonderful day, and we're so happy for Rita. She's a wonderful, wonderful person, ready to go. Well, now let's get to Julius, because that's what you came for. Julius Jefferson Jr. Is the section head of the Research and Library Services section in the Foreign Affairs, Defense and Trade Division at Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress. That is quite a title. In this role, Jefferson leads research librarians who provide public policy research assistance exclusively to members of Congress, congressional committees, and staffers. He also previously served as the acting chief of research and reference services at the Library of Congress. Lots of experience. He is currently our 2020-2021 president of the American Library Association. And he has also served on a number of critical ALA committees, including the Finance and Audit Committee, Budget Analysis and Review Committee, and the Intellectual Freedom Committee, serving as the 2010-2011 chair of that committee. In addition to this service in ALA, Jefferson has had a seat on the board of the Freedom to Read Foundation. He served as the 2013 to 2016 president, served as president of the DC Library Association, and served on the board of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Often called upon authority and speaker on issues of importance to library workers, Jefferson has appeared on a number of media outlets, including NPR, and he is the co-editor of the 21st Century Black Librarian in America Issues and Challenges book, and is often sought as a speaker, which is why we have him here today. I had the pleasure to run into him at a chapter relations organization committee meeting right before the pandemic hit, and what a wonderful, personable person he is. Very welcoming, so much experience, not condescending at all. What a wonderful man. Julius, we're pleased to have you, and I turn the time over to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I want to thank the Utah Library Association for inviting me today, for providing me the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. I want to commend you on that news that you just shared, and congratulate your new president-elect, and commend the Utah Library Association for electing the first person of color. I think that we're making progress with making sure that we are inclusive. And so I only have a little bit of time with you. Of course, I wish I could be with you all in person and see your beautiful faces. Certainly, I would have loved to have come to Utah and been able to just bask in the beauty of your state. But unfortunately, we aren't able to do this, but I am still pleased to be able to connect with you virtually. And also, yes, we had a few glitches, and I want to thank Megan and thank the team for working everything out. Just from my perspective over the past year, there've been so many glitches, but we have overcome so many obstacles. So the time I have with you today, I want to just share a little bit about one of the areas of focus that I spend a significant amount of time with, and that's advocacy. My year as president kind of forced me in that direction, but we had been working to try to build strong advocates on the local and national level for many, many years. And so I thought this was pretty appropriate to just kind of give you a taste of what we've done. When I say we, of course, American Library Association, with the help of people who support libraries across the country, just with making sure that libraries are funded. So as Daniel said, it's been a difficult year. It's been a difficult year for each and every one of us in our country and abroad. But Utah libraries, like so many libraries over the past year, have rescued their communities. And we've seen a significant service from librarians and library workers. For example, school librarians have been instrumental in getting teachers online for remote learning, and university libraries have provided access to research materials and course books for students. Even in recent months, libraries have been vaccine registration and distribution sites around the state. So thank you for serving your communities during this very difficult time in our country. Next slide, please. So when I began my term as ALA president in June of 2020, and actually before then, when I was elected and I was president-elect, I had this really great idea. And you can see this slide is a picture of the United States with little dots. Those are stops. That I would take a tour bus. I would take one of those tour buses that the rock stars use when they go across country for a tour. And I would hear and see for myself what others are doing, what libraries were doing in communities, especially communities, those communities in rural and high need communities in parts of the country that don't normally get a lot of attention. I had the idea that we would go through and visit tribal communities and tribal libraries, historically Black colleges and universities, and of course, those rural libraries. And I would actually be able to meet and talk to people. But because of COVID, we pivoted pretty quickly and we went virtual, and we called the tour Holding Space, because I wanted libraries to know what I'm telling you today in Utah, that your work absolutely matters. It matters to the people in your communities, and it matters to the profession. And I've never been so proud to be a library professional. So again, thank you all for the difference that you are absolutely making. And I just want you to know that in my position, I spend a lot of time on issues at the national and federal level. You see, I actually work right across the street from that building behind me. But I know that there's far more going on than I can see from my 30,000 foot view. So from conversations with ALA state and local advocacy staff, that some of you are doing double time on your advocacy because you're facing issues specific to your own state, your own community, your own library. And I encourage you to continue leaning on the Utah Library Association. Working through your association gives you the advantage of insight into the big picture in Utah and across the nation. So this is one of the important values of the chapter and ALA partnership. Who else is facing your same challenges and how are they dealing with them? So when you work through your association for a coordinated response to issues, you get the support of national, state, and local insiders and the full weight of their authority and backing you up. So again, thank you for inviting me here today, and it's just an honor. Next slide. So today I want to talk about what's happening in terms of advocacy. Go back one. There you go. Today I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in terms of advocacy at the federal level, including pandemic relief funding. That includes IMLS and FCC, the annual federal appropriations, and BALA, the Build America's Library Act. Then I want to talk to you about what you can do to continue the momentum and be a part of the win. And folks, I can tell you, we have had some significant wins throughout this pandemic. Next slide. So libraries have won major relief funding over the past 14 months, and IMLS is just a great place to start. First of all, I just have to take this opportunity to give a shout out to the IMLS director, Crosby Kemper. I've gotten to know Crosby pretty well over the past year, and he is an absolutely great guy. Crosby moved to DC and started as director of IMLS in January 2020, only to return back to his hometown of Kansas City a couple of months later because of the pandemic. And since he started his job at IMLS, he has received $250 million in additional funding to administer with no additional staff. So he is absolutely working overtime. He and his team have done such a fabulous job for libraries. And just a plug, I hope you'll be able to join me. I will be interviewing Crosby live during the ALA annual conference virtually on Saturday, June 26th. And I hope you all will be able to join us. It's going to be an outstanding conversation, and hopefully he'll give us a little insight. I can kind of push him and give us the inside story of what it's been like. So, okay, as you can recall, IMLS received a total of $50 million in the CARES Act and $200 million in ARPA for pandemic response funding. So unlike the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, provides states with a minimum of $2 million and increase from there based on population. In fact, the $200 million from ARPA is the largest single investment in IMLS's 25-year history. And that's so amazing that we got so much money in relief funding, and then we're getting that money out to you. So this chart that you see shows the Utah State Library received nearly $290 in CARES funding last year and more than $2.7 million from ARPA this year. Combine that, one-time relief funding constitutes 150% of the entire year of federal funding for Utah's libraries. Amazing. As with last year's CARES Act funding, state library agencies have discretion to determine how ARPA funds will be spent. That means if you're interested in ARPA funding for your library, you need to stay in touch with your state librarian, Chandra Johnson. So make sure you have a relationship. Next slide. In addition to IMLS, it's also important to remember that ARPA provided more than $360 billion to state and local tribal governments. So libraries of all types may be eligible for some of this funding. States, local, and tribal governments will decide how to spend their piece of the $360 billion pie. The best way to secure funding outside IMLS will be to partner with local governments, school administrators, and other community service organizations. And I strongly encourage you to work closely with the Utah Association to influence that process. ALA has created a state funding guide on how best to obtain state allocated funding. This webpage pictured here, and the link is a way that you can kind of get to that information. So next slide. So that's federal relief funding through IMLS, but there were also billions of dollars in the American Rescue Plan for broadband through a new FCC program called the Emergency Connectivity Fund. And ALA advocated for this program for months. The Emergency Connectivity Fund will provide more than $7 billion to libraries and schools to purchase laptop and tablet computers, Wi-Fi hotspots, and broadband connectivity for students, school staff, and library patrons in need during the pandemic. So the rules were just adopted last week, and the program will begin this summer. One measure in the program ALA is particularly proud of is that tribal libraries are included. ALA worked closely with the FCC to insist on that. And ALA was already on top of this, but when we went across country virtually, we met with tribal libraries and we saw that there was a significant need here. And we advocated and pushed in that direction. So I'm not going to get into the weeds on the program rules. That's why ALA has experts in Washington. They worked hard to smoothen this process out. And it's still not going to be a piece of cake, but it's not as onerous as the E-rate program. I can tell you that. So libraries who choose to participate will need to decide how to spend the funds and what rules they are able to comply with. The main thing I want everyone to know is that ALA is preparing step-by-step resources as part of a toolkit to get started. Our public policy and advocacy team is creating a choose your own adventure type of resource to give you the information that you need to make decisions for your libraries and your communities. Again, that program begins this summer, and ALA's resources for the Emergency Connectivity Act will be posted within the coming week. In addition, ALA's broadband policy experts will host a special session on the program, again, during ALA's annual virtual conference. So again, I encourage you to register for the ALA virtual conference. Next slide. So now for a program that's already started, the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. And we've seen a lot of media coverage on this already. So this program was a part of the relief bill that passed back in December 2020. It's for individuals and households, and ALA has supported this legislation from the get-go. The Emergency Broadband Benefit is a temporary FCC program to help families and households struggling to afford internet service during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know how important it was to be connected during COVID. And we know that libraries stepped up, but that still doesn't mean people shouldn't be connected in their own households. So ALA has detailed information on our fact sheet, but you can certainly follow the link there, getemergencybroadband.org. So through the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, the FCC will give a discount up to $50 per month for broadband service, or up to $75 per month on qualifying tribal lands, and a one-time discount up to $100 for a laptop, desktop, or tablet computer purchased through a participating provider. The program is geared again toward families with low incomes as defined by various federal standards. One to keep in mind, especially for community college and academic libraries, is that students who receive a federal Pell Grant during the current award year are eligible for the Emergency Broadband Benefit. And sometimes small things like that are overlooked and you don't even know that you are eligible to receive benefits. And we want to make sure that everyone is aware. The FCC is relying on libraries and schools to get the word out about this to people who are eligible. The FCC has created some excellent resources, including flyers, posters, social media assets, infographics, newsletter blurbs, and PSAs. Really everything you can need to let your library patrons know about this program. And that's the important thing, is to share information to your communities. So we are sharing the link here, and we hope that you will absolutely share this information with your library users. So library workers in all settings can raise awareness of this new emergency funding, but also some library workers who are furloughed or experience loss of income, as many of us have experienced through the pandemic themselves, may be eligible. So we want you to find out if you're eligible. Again, go to getemergencybroadband.org and share that with all of your library users. Next slide. So, all right. So far, we've been talking about supplemental relief funding. So I can't stress enough that ARPA funding for libraries would not have happened if not for the behind the scenes work of ALA staff in Washington working tirelessly alongside key ALA advocates, chapters, and the state librarians. And of course, all of you. I can tell you that part of that strategy didn't happen overnight. It was a strategy put in place before the pandemic, just building relationships. So when the time came and we all needed funding, it was slightly easier for ALA to actually go to those decision makers in Congress and say, we've already sort of demonstrated that we are making a difference in our communities. So this relief funding was a once in a blue moon opportunity, and all library advocates should be proud that they were successful in making the case for libraries. And that's exactly what you did. In fact, we have to make that case for libraries every single fiscal year. And I want you to know, for the past 4 years, funding for the IMLS and numerous programs that libraries care about have been struck from the White House budget. But at the end of the day, libraries didn't just survive. In one of the toughest environments ever, libraries managed to win increases, which is amazing. So right now, we're trying to get strong funding for fiscal year 2022, which starts October 1. And for the past 4 years, funding for the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS, has increased despite the previous administration's proposals to eliminate the agency altogether, just lined out. You can see in this chart the way Utah's libraries have benefited from these increases in federal funding since fiscal year 2017. But the budget process normally starts early in the year with a proposal from the White House. The process is delayed this year as it's the first year of the new administration. So we expect to find out next week what the president proposes, and it's very unlikely that he will eliminate IMLS. Next week, ALA will be looking for 2 specific library programs we advocate for every year: the Library Services and Technology Act, or better known as LSTA, and the Innovative Approaches to Literacy, IAL, which is in the Department of Education. Next slide, please. So, next slide. There you go. So really, this is where we all can sort of do our part. Because each year, library champions in Congress from both parties draft a letter to members of the House and the Senate Appropriations Committees, House and Senate Approps, asking them for robust funding for LSTA and IAL programs. Then ALA mobilizes library advocates to urge more members of Congress to sign the letters. And these are called Dear Appropriator letters, and they are the best way to generate support for federal funding for libraries. It's the only time when every library advocate can contact their senators and representatives with the same request. Sign these Dear Appropriator letters to fund libraries. Last week was the last chance for members of Congress to sign on to this year's Dear Appropriator letters, and Utah is showing this year was pretty tough. No one in the Utah delegation signed either of the Dear Colleague letters for LSTA or IAL. So, but let's move on to something new. Next slide, please. Something new. So in addition to the COVID funding relief and the annual federal appropriations campaign, ALA is focusing hard on gaining co-sponsors for the Build America's Libraries Act, BALA. And this is a piece of legislation that ALA actually helped craft. So even though libraries have been rock stars for their communities, especially throughout the pandemic, we all know that many library facilities don't come close to reflecting the value within the community. Many of them haven't been updated for many, many, many decades. Next slide. So on our Build America's Library Act website, ALA has a one-pager with details about the bill and what the funding could be used for. Funding will be distributed through IMLS to state agencies. State libraries would then award grants on a competitive basis to libraries in their state. So this is groundbreaking legislation, and it would pave the way for new and improved library facilities, especially in underserved communities across the country. So the best chance to pass the Build America's Libraries Act is to roll it into the infrastructure package. And President Biden introduced his infrastructure package plan back in March. And recently, Senate Republicans offered a much slimmer plan. So far, no proposals include libraries, and that's not good news. But we're glad that the administration has brought focus to modernizing our infrastructure. But the White House and Congress need to know that libraries are a part of our nation's infrastructure, and now is the time to invest. We must invest into our infrastructure, and libraries certainly are a major part of our country's infrastructure. So as of now, like this year's Dear Appropriator letters, not one member of Utah's congressional delegation has co-sponsored the BALA, the Build America's Libraries Act. So we need absolutely for you to start making phone calls because I think that Utah would definitely benefit from this legislation. Next slide, please. All right. So I absolutely know how hard it is as an advocate to hear no, and especially when you keep getting no's. No to co-sponsoring bills, no to signing Dear Appropriator letters. I get it. I've been there. But I want you to know we must keep at it. We must continue to get broad support for library funding at the national level. It is up to us to tell our library stories to decision makers at all levels of government. And that was really the catalyst behind me wanting to go across country. Because I said, if we really want to get more funding, we need to be able to tell our stories, and the decision makers need to know the impact that libraries have in their communities. Why would they want to appropriate funds to libraries over the police or over the fire department or any other services? So it was tell the stories. And when we went across country, we met with members of Congress on the House and Senate side, state representatives, mayors, county executives, and actually we kind of heard their stories. Many of them had library stories, how they were influenced and impacted by their local library, by library workers who assisted them and helped them along their journey. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to tell our stories. So the Build America's Libraries Act is bipartisan. One of the lead sponsors is Representative Don Young from Alaska. In fact, ALA member in California was told by a Republican member of Congress that now is a good time to get federal funding for libraries. Now is the time. The bill is also co-sponsored by another fiscal conservative, Representative Kay Granger from Texas, who is also the ranking member of the House Appropriator Committee. So please do not miss the importance of your advocacy. Do not. Even if your decision makers won't publicly support libraries, you can make sure they don't stand in the way. Support for libraries starts with establishing and maintaining and strengthening relationships. That's what it's all about, is building relationships. Everyone has a library story, believe me. Whenever we have speakers come, everyone wants to tell their story of how their library influenced them. So we must be strategic in our conversations with the elected officials. We must find out what are they interested in and share a library story that will captivate them. Another way of looking at it. Find out what they're interested in, and then connect that with the story that you have in your library. There are just so many ways to tell a story. And if you go to ala.org/advocacy, you'll find samples to help you get started. You'll see videos about how to conduct a library tour in person or virtual, and how to develop a relationship with your local media. We also have a checklist and tip sheets for hosting an elected official at your library, for engaging them on social media. And there are specific resources to guide you at every level of advocacy. So I want you also to know is, on this slide, we talk about 75 years, 45 to 20, that we did recently celebrate 75 years. And for more than 75 years now, ALA has been the voice of America's libraries in our nation's capital. Again, as you can see behind me, I've barely scratched the surface when it comes to the work that the public policy and advocacy team are doing, not just on library funding, but on issues such as copyright, digital content, government information, public service loan forgiveness, and dozens of other issues. These 75 years of expertise and reputation building are part of the value of being an ALA member. And I talk about this throughout my whole presidency of ALA, the value of membership. And this is definitely a part of the value of membership. And as I am at the end of my presidency, I can tell you all that it certainly has been a privilege to serve as ALA president during a time when libraries of all types have stepped up for their communities. I am so proud. Every activity during my tenure as president, has been virtual, except for yesterday, where I actually spent a day in Florida for a hybrid. But prior to that, it was all virtual. All the conferences, all the large governance meetings, council meetings, presiding over the board, all the speaking engagements have been virtual. And I was so pleased to still be able to connect with folks in this virtual environment. And I know, Daniel, as we had some issues connecting today, it's been all a challenge. And so I get it. We've been in this virtual environment. But I can tell you, the pace that I've been advocating for libraries has been virtually nonstop. I have never, fallen asleep on what needs to take place for libraries over the past year. That is exactly why I wanted to be in this position, and was glad to be able to serve and lead, lead us through, as we are still continuing through the pandemic and so many other issues that the country is facing. So on that note, I want to just thank you again for the opportunity to hold space with you all today. And it has been a pleasure to share this story with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julius. We appreciate you joining us so far away. You're almost approaching your lunchtime, I think. So thanks for coming and being with us.
I am, yeah.
That's all right. Hey, I just posted a little comment in the in our chat. We know we started a little late, so we are going to try to give a little bit of time for anyone to submit questions to this wonderful man right here who joined us today. I'm going to take a quick gander. Don't see anything quite yet, but I had a couple, if you don't mind answering, Julius. You gave us the lowdown of all that work, but we haven't had the chance to hear about you and your wealth of other experience. I'm just curious, with that amazing resume, what led you to your path in librarianship? And that's maybe question one. And question two is what are some of the most meaningful things that have come out of your career in libraries?
So I'll take the second question. The meaningful, I think, events have been in my career has been able to serve library users, whether it was serving the members of Congress and their staff and committees, or whether it was serving the American people who come into the Library of Congress. And I worked at a college before that, serving students. It's been able to serve students and provide them access to information and guide them. I still think that being a librarian is such an honorable profession. It is a profession of service, and we need librarians and library workers to be able to do all the work for folks, to kind of lay them and guide them to be able to explore and their intellectual curiosity. And so that has been one of the things that fueled me. But the idea that I would become a librarian is something that I kind of fought, unfortunately. Um, like maybe some of us, I was supposed to be a rock star musician. That's what I was. I actually, when I was 16, Daniel, I did two things. One, I got a summer job working and it was a work study job, like work and go to school and work at the Library of Congress at the Congressional Research Service. And so, you know, it was a great opportunity. I can tell you that I ran from there thinking I would never want to be around, the libraries again. And then the other experience I had at around 16 was that I started touring as a musician. And my first time on a tour was at 16. So I thought that would be my path. But I ended up coming back to libraries and to work in college. It was something that I kind of knew and understood. And I ended up, choosing it as a career. And so most of my career has been at the Library of Congress. And so the service that I provide, sometimes, we don't directly see the impact, but we definitely play a role in how our national legislature works and makes decisions, the Congressional Research Service. And that is fulfilling. We don't always get the slap on the back, and we can't see, like at a public library, you see people come in the public library and you watch them grow from being a kid, and as they get older, or the school library, you can see the kids grow, or the academic library. So we don't see that, but we do at times. We see how the work that we do for the national legislature impacts policy. I mean, the information and the analysis that we give certainly impacts policy. And when that happens, you say, wow, okay, on the 6 o'clock news, Representative so-and-so talked about information that I provided. And so we can kind of see the impact there. So that's kind of how I got into it, and kind of, what kind of fuels me there.
Awesome. I imagine our special librarians that are our members are relating to you and saying, yeah, people don't see the work, that behind the scene. But let me see here. Let me double check with that Q&A. Nothing yet. I did have just a couple more. What we talked about, some of the memorable experiences, but what have been some of your significant career challenges during your time?
Yeah. So I think, you kind of talked about it when you mentioned that you had the first person of color to lead the Utah Library Association. So, diversity is still a major issue in our country, diversity and inclusion, as well as in the profession. And so I've had significant challenges just being a Black man in the profession, and there are so few. And I actually talked a lot about that many years ago, the lack of Black males in the profession, and how can we, what can we do to recruit more Black males? But that has absolutely been a challenge. In terms of actual work challenges, I haven't had many, because just like when we talk about advocacy, I understand that a lot of the success that comes with working in libraries is about building relationships and about listening to people. And I've been pretty good at that. And so I don't remember much about library school, Daniel, I'd say the truth, except for I remember that the goal about library school and the goal for a librarian was that you must satisfy the user's needs, right? And so I've always, focused on satisfying the user's needs, not what I think the user wants, but what users say that they need, and build relationships to be able to find out, like, what do they really need and how can I help? And because I thought that way, I've never really had any issues with doing that part. But there certainly have been challenges of diversity and inclusion within the profession.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that experience with us. Interesting, even across the country, what people are facing in their various spheres. I think then just one final question. You kind of mentioned as ALA president, what your hope is, but you have your own library still as well to continue with. But what is your hope for libraries' future long term, even just besides funding?
Yeah, no, good question. I, Daniel, and it's a good question. It's something that we should all be thinking about. It's something that the Utah Library Association and those who serve in libraries in Utah should be thinking about. I'm looking at the coming out of the pandemic as an opportunity. That when we think about the future of libraries, that we sort of move ourselves from a silo of how we must provide service. There are a lot of ways that we know we can provide service, and some of those ways to provide service absolutely mean that you have to have a physical building, and then there's a lot of service that can be provided digitally. And that's where the funding comes in, right? That's where the support comes in, because we have to be funded to be able to provide information. And the advocacy has to be certainly, making a lot of access to information not so onerous and so costly where people can't afford it. And so we think about, providing access to ebooks. I mean, how many communities may be locked out because they don't have the funding to provide access to ebooks? Or we think about in the academic arena, we look at open access. I mean, we have professors that write papers, certainly that sometimes their own universities can't even purchase them and their students can't benefit from them. So, we have so much to think about. And I think that we have to begin to really think about, when the next 30 to 50 years, what role will we want libraries to play in our lives and to make our lives better? And for me, that becomes an issue of making sure that we have access. And so I'm thinking that we come out of here knowing that we can provide access in many different ways. And that's why I talk about the advocacy and talk about the funding. And we want those decision makers to really get on board and support these communities. And that's why I talk so much about the stories, because I want people to tell their stories moving forward.
Fantastic. Julius, thank you for making time for us today and making this work on a virtual platform. We're just so honored to have you here with us today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Everyone, have a great day. We'll get you to your next session.